Testing my headset. Sue Keen, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Hello, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I'm not there today because my son's wife called us in the middle of the night. So we drove over to pick up two grandkids and
Can you hear me now, Susan?
I can hear you, Marcy.
Oh, I can't hear you. Okay.
You have a new grandbaby?
yes, we do. Well, not yet.
Yeah.
Could be any time. I know.
Your poor daughter-in-law.
Everything's slowed down, so we're waiting patiently. So, but anyway,
Do you know if it's a boy or girl?
they didn't want to share that, so we don't know.
Oh,
So
that's exciting.
time will tell.
I'm not good with secrets. I had to know as soon as I possibly could.
Hey, let's see. I have different headphones here because I left mine at home, so I'm sorry. I'll get it. I hope not to have interference with you.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Representative Harrison. How are you today?
Good. Hey, listen, my internet seems to want to be funky today. So if I can get back connected, I'm going to switch. The computer screen's better on the other one,
Okay.
than my phone.
Okay. All right, gotcha.
Just so you know what's going on.
Hello, Senator Hartley.
Hello, all.
Hello, hello.
Hi. I'm sorry, I'm just bouncing from one meeting to the next. Yeah. Rep Gibson on.
I haven't seen him yet.
Okay. So I know we've got what, 3 agencies here, huh? So we better get rolling, huh?
We should. We're going to start with the Department of Labor.
Yeah.
Got a lot to cram into an hour and a half.
Yeah. And I'm not sure. Commissioner Bartolomeo, did you send us your answers?
We did, but regrettably extremely late. I apologize for that. This short session turnaround has presented a challenge to get through all of the steps. So we got it back today and got it to you today. So I apologize, ma'am.
You know what? I don't have it in front of me. Okay, so I'm going to have to try to get that right now. But why don't you begin, Commissioner, so as to not lose any of these precious minutes.
Okay. And Commissioner, if there's someone on your staff who wants to share their screen with the responses, considering that not all of the members may have had a chance to go through them, we can do that as well.
Fabulous. I'm trying to think which one of us would be best to do that. Billy Taylor, you on here? Mark Pozzella, maybe, or Heidi?
I could give it a shot, Commissioner.
It's Zoom, so I'm not all that familiar with Zoom.
I could try. If you give, do I have access to share the screen?
You do,
Susan?
Mark. Yep.
Okay. What do you want to start with, Commissioner?
Sue? You want us to start with the committee questions before Rep. Nuccio's questions? Okay.
Yeah, well, because I don't think you're gonna have time to get into Rep. Nuccio's questions. Those are
Okay.
really for her. So if you go into the subcommittee questions, that would be great.
Okay, perfect. So as you're doing that, Mark, I'll just start. So Representative Walker had asked us why was the youth program, quote unquote, cut by $5 million. Our response is that SFY 23 was appropriated at 5.01 million and SFY, there we go, 24 at 5.27. We were not a party to the kind of final conversations that happened. And so we just do not have an answer as to why the change and why there was not the 10 million increase in 24, but yet a 5 million increase in 2025. So that had many iterations and we just weren't not privy to that final conversation. Do you want me to hold for questions or how do you want me to do this, Madam Administrator?
I'm gonna first ask Mark if you could blow up the screen a little bit more. Ah, much better, thank you. Yes, so just you can pause, Madam Commissioner, and see if anyone has any questions, and if not, we'll move on.
Yep. Okay, next question. Representative Walkers and Representative Dathan had asked about the long-term unemployment and the reason being that there's a proposed lessening in 2025 for what was originally appropriated. And we had stated that that was due to lapses. So we've tried to give you a really thorough year by year back to 2018, what those lapses were in addition to the percentage. We also made sure that we gave you the contract start date and the contract end date and executed date. So the start and the executed are probably what you're most interested in there. So I don't know if there's any questions on the decision making. If you want to scroll up a little bit more, Mark. So we do point to how many people. Now that's a cumulative. So since 2022, 389 people. We are seeing, we've been working very closely with the workplace through our WEO administration unit, and we are seeing an uptick. We are hoping that the trend that's expected is that they would be not having to lapse in this coming year. We're not real certain about that because right now, if you can go back down a little bit, Mark, I think it shows that we're like at 41% expended, or is that changed? Lapses.
No, I think, I don't know if it's in this document.
Yeah, and the other one. I think
But we
we're
are about 41%.
about 41 thus far with just a few months to go. But we know that they're giving it their best. And a question about what can we anticipate in the future? We expect that they would be able to serve 400 for their next year. Pause. Don't see anything. Contractual basis. So basically what we do here is a reimbursement model. So we need to be able to see invoices to reimburse. We do that during like a monthly basis most often. We have to have all of the supporting documentation and that kind of thing. And the amount is negotiated each year in the budget that you all negotiate with the administration. Any other questions on LTU? Madam Administrator, I assume you'll yell out if I don't see somebody, right? Representative
Don't worry about that.
Thank you. Representative Dathan asked about our labor force participation. And so we have to note that this is a lagging indicator. So through December, Connecticut was at 64.1%. I'm sorry. US national average was at 62.5%. And we also provided you with some of the historicals, Connecticut and the US. We traditionally are a bit higher than the US average, and that trend is continuing that we are higher than the US average. Registered apprenticeship.
Before we go, Commissioner, it's Joan. You're talking about trends. How you doing? I just was wondering, unemployment trends, and this wasn't probably a question, but do you have that offhand in terms of, how our unemployment is stacking up in our major cities compared, nationally?
So as far as our major cities versus nationally, that I don't have, but I think I've got Patrick Flaherty on here with us so he can speak. What I can say is that we are continuing to hover right around the national average. We're at, we've been at 3.8%. We've traditionally, I think it's important to remember that 4% had been considered full employment. We've been doing quite well around that. And we've been a bit lower for a few months. And I think that we're probably going to see a little bit upward trend going forward. As far as our unemployment claimants and filings, for a while, we hit some real historic low numbers. We were down around 20,000 a week, which was extremely low. It's gotten back up to more of a normal level. We're pretty much steady and stable. We're at about 33,000 people filing weekly. We're not seeing that seasonal trend drop off quite as quickly right now. So we've got a few weeks where we've had a little bit higher than we anticipated. But I think that that's all going to be changing within the next week, actually, because I've anecdotally heard of a lot of construction firms that are putting people back on the job this week. So I think that that'll change. Patrick, are you on here? I don't know if anybody can see. I can't see him.
I don't see him, Madam Commissioner.
I'm so sorry. So Joan, but I just have, I'm sorry, Senator, I have not asked the question about our cities versus national cities and how we're doing. I am more than happy to take that back. As a state, I would say we are doing well.
Commissioner, the reason why I ask is because I think there are some outliers in some of our major cities, specifically Hartford, Waterbury, that have had unemployment numbers well beyond, that 4% level. And I'm just, wondering where they are right now. And I mean, I think that's an important data point that we should not lose sight of.
I am happy to get that for you and to put it in context. We will also provide what those same municipalities were pre-pandemic so that we can see if there's been a sustainable gap or if that's something new.
Yeah, thank you. I would, no, it's been, I mean, this kind of has gone on, I think, since the pandemic. And I think they're still, those two municipalities are still outliers.
Okay. We will get that for you. I wasn't prepared with that.
My apologies.
No, it's okay. I'll keep going. So the registered apprenticeship program was also something of interest to Rep. Dathan. I tried to give you more information rather than less. And the reason I did that is because registered apprenticeship is actually something that we are hoping to better educate the public on what registered apprenticeship programs are versus just the word apprenticeship. It gets thrown around an awful lot these days. It seems to be a bit trendy. Registered apprenticeship is kind of the gold standard, tried and true, that is promoted by U.S. Department of Labor, and that is what we do at the Department of Labor. It is different from many programs that are now calling themselves apprenticeship. It's different in that the employee the apprentice is hired and an employee from day one, and that continues and that doesn't change. We hear about some where there's a year on and then they see if they're going to be hired. That's not a registered apprenticeship. Also, with the registered apprenticeship, it is employee driven, employee led. the competencies can be customized by the employer. There's minimum numbers of hours that have to be on the job training. There's progressive wage scales. We are the only entity in the state of Connecticut that's authorized by the federal government to be able to certify. We are the state apprenticeship agency. So it's really important to us that we explain what that is. So we put a lot of information in here for you. We have about 6,600 registered apprentices in the state right now. That's a rolling, so some come on, some come off as they complete. About 1,700 employer sponsors right now. You can't have a program without an employer sponsoring the apprentices. About 55 occupations. Really excited that, you know, the traditional trades are going strong, but also we've been adding some other occupations like cosmetology, family child care, the teacher registered apprenticeship. So it's a very strong and solid program right now for us. That being said, the funding for this is always a challenge because although the U.S. Department of Labor promotes registered apprenticeship strongly, we don't have a continual administrative funding stream that comes to us from the federal government. So what we have are time to time, there's grants, sometimes there's more grants, sometimes there's less grants. And then, you know, there's some other kind of ways that we, through fees and things, can support staff. We are definitely at a position where we've got 13 folks in the registered apprenticeship unit, including Director Todd Birch. 2 of those folks are being paid for right now on a federal grant that is expiring. So in the governor's budget, there is funding and proposal for 2 FTEs, but I need to be clear that those are to take the place of expiring federal grants. So it does not get us to increase capacity. It allows us to remain status quo. There was some question about increases annually. I would say that if you were looking at things like contractual increases, the budget has not increased for our unit annually because it's been right around $500,000. The $600,000 in 2023 was because there was a 27th pay period and contractual increases within there. So that has not, you know, in perspective, has not been increasing annually. So we appreciate the governor proposing to keep those 2 staff on general fund with expiring federal, but by no means is that unit without work. They have plenty to do. Any questions on apprenticeship? Okay, we move up, Mark. Thank you, sir. Senator Hartley, Madam Chair, you asked about the ARPA. We provided you with a chart, if you scroll down a little bit, of all of the ARPA that our agency has had an opportunity to utilize. I don't know if you have any additional questions from the information that we've got in the chart, but it provides you with the available funding and their amount. When we say remaining, I have to just be very careful to say that remaining means it's been incorporated into whether it be earmarks, obligations, contracts. So we do not expect it to lapse.
Okay, so Commissioner, you're basically telling us that all of the DOL ARPA money will be expended at the conclusion of this fiscal year?
Yes, we are. We are on track to do that. That's the expectation. But I would also say, yeah, Chris is going to point out the 11.9.
The time frame for ARPA funding runs through December 31st. So the ARPA funding does run on a different fiscal time period. So at the end of this state fiscal year, we'll have about approximately 4 ARPA funding streams that will still have some money remaining, but it should definitely be fully expended by the end of the ARPA period.
Yes, thank you. So it's the calendar year And I would just say the unemployment trust fund, that amount that you see right there, it may look relatively large, but it is accounted for because that is the amount that's within our holding account to be able to pay the employer's interest on the trust fund loan so that they don't have to be served with special appropriation bills.
Yeah, and remind me again, Commissioner, when we have totally satisfied that loan, that indebtedness. I know you did say it in your initial meeting before the committee.
Yes, so what I'd like to do is mark, so it says on here, the next one says see attachments. So Mark, do you have the ability to switch over to that attachment? If not, I do have it as well.
I'm gonna give it a try.
Now, I will offer that if there is anyone who doesn't at first glance in this really, short time frame that we have, able to understand the chart that we're about to show, more than happy to have additional conversations because it is pretty complicated. Okay. Oh, wrong one, Mark. Do you want me to share mine? Marissa sent it last. You're muted.
Yeah, I think I don't have the right one open.
Okay. That one just had some funding, some weird like funding abnormalities.
Gotcha.
Let's see.
I can get it.
Somebody else can get it? Okay.
I believe this is it.
Yep, perfect.
Okay.
If you could go move over and blow it up.
I'm assuming it's the same way as.
Yeah, go to
Zoom.
the first one to the left, just control and scroll.
To the left. The snow opera one?
Yep, if you could probably make that a bit larger for folks, that would be great. Okay, so what we've done for you is we've actually done this for OPM and the governor's office, and we're sharing all of this with you. Right now, this one on the left, the no ARPA funds, that is what we go by. That is the projection that we're currently working within. And what you can see is, obviously the red is the minus and the black is the plus. We have starting like in March, for instance, we had a negative 143.6. That is our current trust fund loan balance. And when you look at the other columns, revenues coming in, that's your state unemployment taxes. So when we get in our quarterly taxes from businesses paying their, their unemployment insurance, that's that column. The FUTA would be the amount for that the federal unemployment tax. Monthly expenditures are actually the benefits that we pay out monthly, and then it's quarterly. The next column just brings it into quarterly, and then you've got your weekly. So now we are guessing. We're looking in Patrick Flaherty's crystal ball. We're trying to look at trends and guess what amount of weekly filers we'll have and how much we will be paying out in benefits on a weekly basis. Not an easy thing, always has been. Since the pandemic, it's even more difficult. There is really, the pandemic has really kind of blown up all of the trends and traditional numbers that we would go by. I'm sorry, I don't know if Sarah Hartley's wanted me to wait on this because this was her.
No, thanks very much. You're right. There's a lot of information. Yeah. No, I guess I was just asking what was the end date when we have satisfied our loan, so to speak, to the feds.
Okay, so I wish I could give you a better answer, but these charts and this information spells it out, and I'm more than happy to do it with somebody. This is right now, to the best of our ability, if our economic conditions don't change. And if our projections and estimates are correct, we're looking at, Mark, if you could scroll up, there's a couple key dates here. We explain them. We have to, Joe, Senator Hartley, this is so confusing because one, we've got the balance. Two, we've got to estimate revenues coming in, which has been off a bit because of some legislation. When we pulled out the experience years of 2021 and 22, that meant revenues came in less than we were, anticipating. We're basically guessing what we will have to pay out weekly and monthly and annually. But to the best of our ability, if you scroll, please, Chris, I guess, scroll down on that.
Yeah.
We would be at this point in time, hopefully somewhere in 2026, towards the end of 2026, we would hope that we would be at a point to not have to do any additional borrowing. If conditions remain the same, that should be the case. We should also be in a situation where employers do not have to pay additional FUTA or interest. Now, whether or not that happens is contingent upon where our trust fund is on certain dates, being November 9th and January 1st. Those are critical dates that the feds look at. So the best we can say is that with no ARPA, we're somewhere hopefully at the end of 2026. What we then did was we took and said, if there were additional ARPA available and if there was an appetite by the administration and by the legislature to add to this, we gave a couple scenarios. Scenario one was if there was like $10 million. Scenario two is if there was $100 million. And scenario three is if there was $275 million that was to be added into this. Scenario, I said scenario five, scenario, Chris, this is so hard because it's small. Can you scroll it back a little bit, make it smaller?
Make it smaller?
If you make it smaller, please. And then, yeah, that got bigger.
Yeah. It's probably a delay.
Okay, can you go down a little bit? So what you'll notice here is that the green boxes on the fourth row are where we say, okay, if we add 10 million, if we add 100 million, if we add 275 million, you'll see the changes that happen in these boxes that we've highlighted November 9th and of each year and January 1st of each year. The reason we've done that is because those are key dates that tell whether or not our interest rates go up and whether or not there's additional fees added. When we get to the 10 million or the 100 million, you'll see that we down the bottom, we still need to at some point be borrowing because the trust fund balance, although it's in the positive more, it also does go back and hit the negative at the months where we have less revenue coming in and we still have benefits to pay out. The only one on the right side, the fourth one that is consistently in the black is the one with the 275 million. And basically what that means is that one we project would be the one that would start us immediately this year on being able to pay everything off, be able to pay benefits and start to accumulate in the trust fund. Down below in the narrative, we try to make that more clear for you. If you could scroll again, Chris, please, and move back over to the left. We have some narrative that explains what these charts are telling you number-wise. Again, my team and I are very happy to further explain this to anyone. You're muted, ma'am.
I'm good, Commissioner. Thank you for that.
Okay, so that was the attachment. Next, we had questions about the contact center. So will funding for the current 105 consumer contact center employees expire in December of 2024, or only the funding for this 20? So basically what's happening is I've given you, and if Mark, I think now can bring that one back up. I've given you all the detail with a little bit of context and history around the staffing in the consumer call center. So during the peak of the pandemic in 2021, we actually had about 450 staff and vendor combination that were in the call center. The really important piece of that is they were all new. They all, the vast majority, other than about 15 of our folks, were new to this. So now that they have been with us longer and trained, I would point out that in January 2023, we had 154 staff in the consumer contact center. 60 of those were what we ESII. That's just the classification for the temporary folks that are working there. And you'll see that what happened was when last year's budget ended, and we started the 2024 fiscal year, we did not have additional funding. So we were in a position of deficit mitigation. That's where we stand today. So projecting that we didn't have the one-time funding that had come in to support the call center in this budget, we have had to, as folks with attrition, I would say, or as people leave to go to other jobs because they know that they don't have a permanent position here, our counts have gone down. We are able to continue right now with the staff that we have through December 31st of 2024. The governor has budget proposes 20 positions to make permanent. That would pretty much keep us right where we are today. So current wait times and current staffing would remain as we are today if the governor's proposed budget were to continue to pass with those 20 positions. If it were not, we are continuing in a deficit mitigation situation, and that will affect the call center. Any more on that one? Okay, so the next, I guess, was about the IT positions. That is the position counts have been moved over, and this is really just kind of general fund other expenses like telephone and phone costs and that kind of thing. The majority of our staff and are federally funded. So the way that we are working is that we code the IT staff that are working on DOL business to a certain code that is paid by our federal grant funding, as opposed to sending funding over to DAS for administrative hours and staff. Chris, was that correct?
That is, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I do believe that that is all that we had from the committee questions, but there's a whole lot more. We're happy to answer a whole lot more if you have them.
Yeah, Commissioner, just one point of clarification. Those 20 IT positions, the transfer for DAS, didn't we start that the first year of the biennium?
Yes, the positions have been within core. They are within core, have been within core. This, I think that the reason it's in, well, I don't know that I can explain the reason it's in here this way. They are currently in core at DAS. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, they're DAS employees who code to our funding sources, but they work for DS. They work for DAS and have been. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, that I'm kind of. I'm just kind of recalling a conversation last year on this subject. I'm just looking to see if there are any additional hands raised, and please, if I'm missing someone, just kind of let me know here. I don't see any. Commissioner, as always, thank you for being so responsive, you and your team, to us. Having said that, that might not be the end of our questions, but for this time, I think that it is if I don't see any hands raised.
Yes, and as always, that's a very complicating trust fund chart. More than happy to go over it with anybody who'd like.
Yeah, no kidding.
Try learning it, Senator.
Yeah, no. Well, you got it color coded and it's, it's laid out very well. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate you being with us. And I think at this point, we'll bid you adieu. And I think we're moving on now to Department of Housing. Bye-bye. Is it DOH right now, Madam Administrator? I thought it was.
That's correct, Madam Chair, and the housing team is here.
And good afternoon to you all. And thank you for the follow-up and also for your response to us on our previous questions. Madam Commissioner, maybe probably the most organized way to do this is to run through these questions and your responses. And as we have with our previous group, if there are questions from the subcommittee members, they will weigh in. So go ahead.
Good afternoon, Senator Harley, Representative Gibson, Senator Gordon, Representative DiCaprio, and members of the Subcommittee on Conservation and Development. We submitted our responses, and do you want us to share the responses and go through one by one?
Yeah, well, let's do that, recognizing that we're basically within a 30-minute time frame here. If you can walk us through in a succinct fashion, and if there's any need for interpretation, we will flag that. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, I want to recognize my staff that is with me to help me to answer any questions. Deputy Commissioner Brandon McGee, Michael Santoro, and Steve Delila, Melvin Castillo, and Maribela Luz. Michael or Steve, how can we share the document, or is...
I can share, up to you, Steve, you or me.
I got it right here.
Go for it.
Okay, but I think the other piece is we did send a lot of spreadsheets. So I guess the question will be, do you want us to also share those spreadsheets?
So we'll go, let's go through the first question, which includes a lot of the spreadsheet. And Senator, Madam Chair, the first question was about providing spreadsheets of funding for the homeless services system through the OH by funding source and program. We submitted a spreadsheet detailing those numbers and funding sources. So if you would like, we can go and Steve can share that and go over the spreadsheet.
I have the spreadsheets open if you want, Steve. It's up to you.
All right, perfect. Thanks. You go for it, Mike.
And Steve, could you go ahead and go over?
Sure, no problem. So I think as many of you know, we have committed, or we conducted a homeless services rebid through the beginning part of fiscal year 24 that will have contracts that start on January 1. So fiscal year 24 is kind of split between the old contracts that we had and then the new ones, which will start, which have started on January 1st. So here you'll see a reflection of some of the work that we did complete as a result of that rebid. So you can see the differences between fiscal year 24 and 25, but we also threw in there fiscal year 23 because that would have been the last full year of the old system or the old contracts that we had in place. So you'll be able really to take a look at that. And then we also wanted to take a look at the behest of the subcommittee or the appropriations committee, how that differed from pre-pandemic. So we also included fiscal year 2019 in this. And then we did some of the nice math in there, the difference between those fiscal years. So if you have any specific questions, you can see the different program types. I can go through them. Coordinated Access Network, that is the funding source that really helps staff up our entry system. So when somebody needs to come into the overall homeless service system. There are staff across the state that are tasked with doing sort of those intake appointments and help placing people in the proper areas, whether it is in shelter or if people are outside, to coordinate with homeless outreach to engage them into the homeless service system and put them on a pathway to permanent housing. Diversion is something that we've really started to invest heavily in. And this is at that first intake appointment. If there's anything that we can do or our private nonprofits agencies that can do with a little bit amount of funding to prevent an entry into homelessness, we'll do that. Such activities may be a security deposit, paying for unpaid electrical bills to get the lights turned back on, a car repair so somebody can get back to work, maybe a gift card to help assist the family in terms of shopping, whatever it needs, whatever the family identifies. So that's what diversion is. Permanent supportive housing. This is one of the best known interventions to resolving homelessness. It combines a permanent rent subsidy with permanent case management services for those that have high barriers to housing. DOH partners very heavily with the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, who has a large line item of their own for the permanent supportive housing, and DOH also commits some vouchers. However, this reflects some of the small funding that DOH has, particularly for its own projects in permanent supportive housing. Rehousing is an intervention that provides medium-term or short-term rental assistance with short or term case management, with the ultimate goal of having that household re-enter the permanent housing through their own means, whether that is by gaining education, employment, or other benefits that they'll be able to take on their own rental assistance. That first line on rapid rehousing is for case management purposes. The second line is the rapid rehousing rental assistance administrator, and that is the entity that actually pays the rents directly to the landlords. Shelter, I think most folks would know what that is. That's just emergency shelter. So those folks who find themselves in a homeless situation and need a roof over their head, through our system, they can enter into one of our 40 or so shelters. So that is that funding line that pays for that. What was new in fiscal year 25 and half of 24 is the last two United CT security deposits in the hubs. Those hadn't existed previously when you go back to fiscal year 23 and 2019. So Unite CT Security Deposit offers security deposit to anybody in the homeless service system, and that will be a cash benefit up to 2 months of security deposit, which is an excellent resource to help people get out of a homeless situation and into housing. And then the last line there is the hubs, and this is something that the commissioner has championed and is a new alternative way to increase capacity within the overall homeless service system. I think we all know that our entry system used to be directly through 211, which still remains an important part of the system, but we also realized that we needed to have other entry points for folks that did not have the ability to connect to 211 directly. So we've been able to set up physical locations in 13 communities across the state where folks can kind of go in, drop in, and get their intake appointment, and then get some of these other potential services. So you'll see yeah, go ahead.
Steve, I will just add that we also included all the different federal resources. That's the numbers that you see to the left. So we don't gonna go all over those, but if anybody has any questions on those ARPA, ESG, federal resources and state resources, before we go to the next question.
Yeah, no, Madam Commissioner, so I guess my question is about timing. And I appreciate all the stats that you're sharing with us and the program's depth and breadth, but the emergency shelter contracts, they're typically out January 1st, and also the rapid rehousing. But yet, I mean, I know down in my neck of the woods, we're not seeing that. It's the end. I mean, last time I checked, it was the end of February. Okay, we're now into the first week of March. And those documents had not been executed for two really important initiatives. That's the emergency shelter and the rapid rehousing.
Thank you, Senator Harley. Because we did a rebid of the whole system in December, then we also needed to have the contracts. We have been working with the Attorney General, and they sign off on the new contracts. We are in the final process within the next 2 weeks. My staff has committed to make sure that they send all those contracts out to our vendors. We understand, and we appreciate that they have been working with us in trying to get this out.
Yeah, but we missed the season, so to speak. And I mean, as you know, the providers they exist on a razor's edge with regard to their their bandwidth here.
So there are some of the resources that they have access to, like the rapid rehousing. Some of the other contracts that we have for the shelters operations, as I mentioned, they should be out in the next couple of weeks.
I'm still having a hard time because when we do a rebid, I'm sure you got to factor in the calendar here, because we're talking about emergency shelter. And this is the season. I mean, luckily today is 55 degrees or something like that. But it wasn't like that in certainly January and February.
So as I say, if you're talking to the regular shelters, those contracts are the ones that are going to go out. For the emergency shelters, those went out in, Steve, was that November or December?
Well, all I know, I'm getting emails about 4 contracts that have yet to be executed on the emergency shelter and the rapid rehousing. So look, I know, you're tasked in a lot of different directions, but when we're talking emergency shelter, I mean, it says it right there.
I understand, Senator. Go ahead, Steve.
So what I can say is, yes, the contracts are in process. Although they have been delayed, the contractors will receive full funding according to what our letter stated for their awards. So they will receive all the funding needed, although, like I said, it is delayed and we're working diligently to get that done. I think one important part to look at with the emergency shelters in particular was when we did this rebid, we actually increased funding. We were able to increase funding with our conversations with OPM for certain shelters, especially Senator Hartley in your district. I know some of your shelters received pretty significant increases, so that will greatly help them in their operations going forward. And once those contracts get executed, hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll be able to process the payments and they'll be in a really good situation.
No, I hear you, Steve. It's just, keeping them holding on,
Yeah.
How long do you tread water? That's all.
Yeah. We understand, and we're working as diligently as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry for the interruption there. Yeah, you can go on.
All right. Question number 2 is the comparison to 5 years ago. So we have, how has the homeless services system changed compared to 5 years ago? In our response in the last 5 years, we have been building out the front end, but including more funding for diversion, as well as creating additional access point for homeless households to gain entry to the homeless service system. And that was what Steve mentioned before. Those are the hubs. We also have been successful in continue applying and receiving additional federal resources for the homeless programs. Steve, on B and C, do you want to add anything else?
We also did provide a chart for that, so you can document some of those changes over the past few years.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to question 3. For the recommended $1.5 million ARPA allocation for a voucher application portal. The question was, who is the vendor? We have been working with Matrix Rental Solutions, and they will be working with our housing authorities and us to develop this platform that will streamline the application process, connecting applicants, housing authorities, and landlords through a user-friendly interface, reducing the administrative costs and also the time and processes. What's the time frame for this? We're counting on 10 months. We will be done by April 25. Good application applied to. The next question was, is there an expectation that applicants will be able to apply for multiple vouchers with one application? And the answer is yes, that's the intention. Metrics Connect will allow applicants to apply for multiple vouchers through a single streamlined application process. How will housing authorities be trained or connected? That's the process that we're going to start in organizing and talking to all the housing authorities that would like to participate and engage in outreach to all of them. And Metrics will be the vendor that will provide that training for them. Details on how legislator can help publicize this. Metrics Connect will help legislators. It will be through media, campaign, and other venues. And the next question on this was, how will people without a smartphone or computer access will have access to this type of resources? Metrics Connect will be accessible to individuals without personal technology through multifaceted approach, training staff on the ground with local housing authorities, establishing pop-up application centers and kiosks where individuals will have access, and there will be a body there to help them out. The next question is, okay. Number 4 is, can you provide statistics on rental assistance vouchers issued, utilized, and those remaining unused by region to the extent available? I know we submitted several attachments with the spreadsheet, but Steve, if you just want to summarize on both Section A and vouchers.
Sure. So I think that that those attachments will be helpful for all representatives to kind of look at the area. I know it was questioned if we can provide it by region. We don't necessarily do it by region. We actually do it by town. So you can actually see how many vouchers for our Section 8 program as well as our rental assistance program are administered per town, as well as those who are issued. So basically those are individuals who are out looking and trying to find an apartment. One of the key factors that we need to realize is, although we may have a number that HUD gives us, for example, the maximum number that we can lease up is 9,194 units between the Housing Choice Voucher as well as some of the specialty programs. HUD backs it up by giving us a budget authority. So oftentimes the budget authority that is granted to DOH will not allow us to support the 9,194 units. So what we try to do is get as close to our budget authority in terms of spending as possible. So at this rate, we currently have 8,392 vouchers that are leased up today, or at the end of February, I should say. And there are 551 households that are issued a voucher and currently looking for a unit throughout the state of Connecticut. So that will place our Section 8 program basically at full capacity in terms of budget authority, even though we won't be able to reach that total number of 9,194. Very similar for RAP. There isn't necessarily a set number of certificates that we have available, but basically it is done by the funds that are appropriated to DOH. We try, once again, just like we do in Section 8, to come as close to that budget authority as possible. We also know that in the past there has been some times where we haven't been able to fully spend our funds, and that was generally due to lease up of new programs. For example, the CHESS program, in which we had to get CMS approval for the services side, we had to hold on to those vouchers until that was approved. That, however, has happened now, so we are leasing up every single one of our programs. So now currently we have 6,534 certificates leased up, with an additional 374 households that are currently looking for units throughout the state of Connecticut. Once those are all full, we'll basically be at our budget capacity and we'll be fully leased up.
Thank you, Steve. Any question on that?
Seeing none, Madam Commissioner, you can proceed. I think we're up against the clock here.
Okay. Question number 5, please provide an analysis of recent carry forward in ARPA funding, including DOA has received ARPA funds for diversion services, rapid rehousing services, as well as homeless services, which were mainly used for the creation of the hubs. DOH has awarded all of its diversion and rapid rehousing and HAP funding. In the decisions to allow contractors to spend the ARPA funding through the expiration period of December 31st, 2026. It is expected that all contractors will fully spend these funds by that date. Question number 6 is what ongoing expenses have been funded with temporary funds that may result in future funding voids? Are there any such voids expected in 2026, fiscal year 26? DOH has not used ARPA funding for previously funded projects. Instead, DOH has used ARPA funds to create new programs like the hubs, as we mentioned before, or expand existing programs like diversion and rapid rehousing. By utilizing multi-year contracts with ARPA funds, DOH spread the funds over multiple years, reducing the large impact with ARPA funds expired. In addition, DOH has also identified additional federal resources to replace some of the ARPA funds that we have used in some of the programs, like the hubs.
And Commissioner, could you go back? So that was an analysis of the recent carry forward. Do you have carry forward in this budget?
No.
There's no carry forward. Okay.
No.
All right.
We were asked to provide the dashboard for time to own program. We provided the link that will provide detailed information. Just summarizing, the program had about 3,243 people closed on the first home. We have another 453 on the reservations. Average loan was about 30,000. And the remaining balance is 26 million. Next, if any questions, or I'll go to number 8. Number 8 is what programs are available for veterans? Steve, can you just summarize to know them better than me?
Sure. Currently, DOH has 2 programs specifically designed for veterans. One is called the VASH program. That's a federal partnership between the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs, in which HUD gives DOH vouchers for homeless veterans, and then the VA, the federal VA, matches with support services. So it works like a traditional permanent supportive housing program. It has been extremely successful here in the state, to the fact that we've been able to reduce veteran homelessness, which is excellent. We also did recently receive 24 extra vouchers, which we will put into use as well as soon as we can. Similarly, DOH created a very similar program using the RAP program, because within the VASH program, that is only for homeless veterans who are honorably discharged. So for those that were just standard discharged, it would not be available. So DOH created that VASH program to really combat any veteran who is experiencing homelessness. Clearly Veteran, those are programs specifically set aside for veterans. Clearly Veterans are eligible for any of our other programs as long as they meet the income requirements. And there are numerous other programs specifically designated for veterans that fall obviously outside the jurisdiction of DOH.
Thank you, Steve. If there are no questions, I'll go to number 9. And number 9 is how is the rising cost of rent impacting the RAP program? I know there is a lot of explanation in there, but definitely the increase in rents, we are spending more in the certificates because of the lack of more housing that is affordable to those individuals that are looking for. Steve, you want to add any 1 or 2 things there?
Sure. I think a couple of things that we're trying to do is, yes, we have seen a dramatic increase in rent over the past few years after the pandemic, and we've been able to balance that to date without affecting the numbers that we mentioned before. We still can lease up to that full potential. The other piece of this is DOH has really tried to be as extremely flexible as possible to meet the needs of our individuals who are out looking for units and for those who need to recertify. So in the past, we would do an annual increase in our maximum allowable rent, but during the pandemic, we noticed, especially in 2022, that rents went up so quickly that we actually released our maximum allowable rents 5 months earlier to give those who are looking over recertifying the additional buying power to actually be able to meet some of those increased rents. DOH will continue to strive to do that as long as it meets within what we are seeing in the market. So we're trying to be as competitive as possible. But that being said, we also know that it is difficult to find units, and our folks who have vouchers are competing with the general public. So we will do our best, whatever we can, but knowing that there is competition for our vouchers compared to just people without vouchers in the community.
Madam Chair, should I continue with number 10?
Senator, you're muted.
I cannot hear you.
Sorry. No, I'm just saying we are up against the clock, and we've got actually 2 more questions. If you could kind of summarize the OAC response, and also the last one is the opportunity map, which probably people can kind of go through after the fact, because it's very well explained there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the number 10 about the relationship with the Department of Education, we created a Head Start on Housing with the Department of Early Childhood Education, and we have 150 vouchers that we dedicated to them. So far, we have utilized, I think it was a little 68 families has been housed, a little more than 100 kids have been now placed on a permanent housing. We have dedicated another 100 vouchers to the McKinney-Vento with the Department of Education, and we are working with them actively to be able to utilize those resources. And the last questions is self-explanatory, the Connecticut Opportunity Map used by CHFA. And if there is any other questions, we're happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Commissioner. And I'm looking to see if we've got other hands raised from colleagues. I don't see any. Is there anybody who I'm missing?
No, there aren't any hands raised, Madam Chair.
No, okay. And so I just want to thank you very much. And then, so Steve, I'm going to tell my people that they're going to see those contracts like in a week.
So the first step is we are creating the budgets, and we send out the budgets for them to return to us. So I know Mel, who's also on this call, has been working as hard as he can. He's prioritized the shelters as the #1 option to get those budgets out. It's called Uniform Chart of Accounts, the UCOAs,
yeah.
And his staff is working.
So basically, Senator Harley, we are sending them some paperwork. They need, as soon as they sign those and they complete those forms, they need to send it to us so that we can process. It's okay. Sometimes it depends from them and us. So right now we're sending their documentation so that they can complete and send it back to us.
Okay, I think they'll get it back ASAP. All right, let's try to get over the finish line. Hey, I appreciate very much your presentation today. And thank you for being with us, Commissioner.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Okay. After you all.
Thank you.
And I think, Madam Administrator, that brings us on to Deep Bureau. And was it the council?
And CEQ.
Yep. Okay. And Deep team is here. Well, I see Harrison.
Hi, Senator.
Hi.
Yeah, we've got Commissioner Dykes here as well, but I think she's muted.
I'm here. Thanks so much.
Okay. Hi. Good afternoon to you, Commissioner. And thank you very much for these responses in color, no less. I guess the red is emphasizing the response. Appreciate that. I think probably what we'll do, to be expeditious here is if we'll go through the questions, and in a summary fashion, and entertain questions by members as we go through the responses. Does that work for you?
Terrific. Okay. Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, it's a go.
Okay, super. So the first question for this work session related to Passport to Parks, and we provided here a projection of or just the actuals in terms of our current budget and projections. And I'm happy to turn to Mason Trumbull to elaborate briefly on this piece. Or Andrew Hoskins, who's ever unmuting fastest.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think the specific question here was fringe, so I'll direct you to just line 3 there. You can see there that the fringe expense last year was the largest expense out of the expenses on the passport account, along with our operational expense, seasonal staff, and full-time staff, as well as some other funding there. So happy to get into more details if you'd like to, but hopefully that provides some of the information you were looking for.
Also, would it be helpful if I shared my screen for folks?
Yeah, I think that would work.
Great.
Yeah.
I'll do that. You guys can keep chatting.
Have it. Yeah. Hands up. Does anybody? I know Passport Parks is a very important program, and we've been kind of working through some of those issues, but I don't see any hands. Am I missing anything? Then missing anybody? Just step right up. Okay.
Harrison, can you blow it up a little bit, please? Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that helps.
My apologies. I thought you were all looking at it. It's a 7.6 million there on the fringe expense from last year.
I'm seeing 8. What do you?
Oh, we have 2 lines there. So I apologize. Let me explain. The one on the left is our budget from calendar year 23, and the column on the right is our actual expense.
Oh, actual.
Year. So we did come in a little bit under budget with fringe, but we're trying to be as responsible as possible in this account, knowing that we've been very open with the appropriations committee about the impending insolvency of the account as we look to the future and the escalation of costs. So
yeah. So the underspend on the projection was because you weren't up to capacity on staffing.
Yeah, that was part of it. To be honest with you, I think we were the fringe is one of the expenses that we don't have direct control over, so I can't really speak to the difference there other than it is directly tied to staffing, like I said. So. And the fringe expense, just to be clear, is the fringe for both seasonals and full-time staff. So.
I'm sorry, it's for full-time
and seasonal staff. Those would be the first 2 lines in that spreadsheet you're looking at.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Cindy, go ahead. Representative Harrison.
There. Why are we so over budget on operational expense, and where do we think we are going to land here?
That's a very fair question. So we have seen costs escalate significantly in the inflationary environment that we are in. And so as we look to the future, I think that line item will continue to escalate. To be perfectly candid and honest with you, we've seen a 75% increase in staff. 75% increase in visitation to our parks. A lot of those expenses are wrapped up in both our seasonal staff expenses as we hire more staff, trying to meet that demand, and then also our operational expenses, knowing that at some level, the more people who visit the parks, the more that drives up costs as well.
So what do we think we're going to do to, fund it, right?
I think that's Representative. I think that's, that's really for, I guess we're presenting this information just to give a sense of what the different costs are on Passport, and certainly we'd be, to the extent that there are any proposals with respect to how to address bringing the Passport revenues in balance with the operational needs of running the parks. We'd be glad to provide any additional information that would be helpful there.
So can you break this operational cost down so that you know, we can take a good look at it exactly and pinpoint like where your inflation's coming, if you're saying it's inflationary, and where, you know, this is just one line.
Sure.
I'm sure there's sublines and sublines of sublines. I get it, but I'm sure that we can provide additional information besides that.
We'd be glad to do that. We are required to submit a quarterly report, which does include that breakdown. And if you have specific questions on that, we're glad to address that. But we will provide that and have been on a quarterly basis for you.
I guess another question I have is, why are we booking fringes into the Passport Park?
I'm not in the best position to answer that. I think that's been a budgetary decision-making process over the last 3 to 5 years in this account.
Because I know that all the fringes are consolidated into controller's account.
Again,
Mason, I could answer this if folks
Sure, go ahead,
could hear me. Yeah, I was just so on special revenue accounts and federal funds, fringe benefits are directly charged to those accounts. So just appropriated funds, they're charged to comptroller's budget for fringe benefit.
Right. Okie doke. Look forward to getting some additional reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Harrison. I don't see any other hands, so yeah, we can proceed.
Great. Okay, thank you. The next question that we were asked about was with respect to funding that was provided in the budget for improvements at East Rock and West Rock parks. And I'll again turn to Mason Trumbull on the detail here, but I think we were responding with status as well as describing the scope of some of the different improvements that have been funded with these dollars.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. And I apologize. I introduced myself earlier, Mason Trumbull, Deputy Commissioner for Environmental Conservation. 2 things here. Just a quick reminder for those of you who may not be familiar with this. East Rock is a municipal park. West Rock is a state park. And so the funds allocated to West Rock State Park are mostly expended at this point. We have paved the road going to the summit and the parking area at the top. We are still working on expending part of the remaining portion of those funds on a picnic area and some other parking areas along the bottom of the road that goes to the top of West Rock State Park. For East Rock, that's a municipal park, and so we have entered into a contract with the city of New Haven, who is working on the specific parts of expending these funds, which you can read in the description below. Again, that's a New Haven project, so not a project that Deep is leading, but we have expended the funds to them, and they have a contract with us to do that.
Seeing no hand. Oh, Pat, yeah, go ahead, Representative Dillon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speed reading this, but do we have the details on the extent of the proposal to partially stem the flooding in the West Rock area? And I mentioned that without there's one small piece which is about 500,000.
That's it.
But the flooding issues there go back years, and there was a high water table. The Army Corps was out there years ago after an extreme weather event, and the flooding now affects residential homes in some areas and also affects the commercial district. So this, if I recall correctly, was after there was an extraordinary event, and I believe I was out on the street that day. Do you have any extra details besides this paragraph for us to see?
Certainly. So this paragraph details this latest grant that we provided to the WPCA. That is a planning grant under the Deep Climate Resilience Fund, which is a bond-funded program. But as you know, we have a long history of working with Westville and with the WPCA to address the chronic flooding issues there. I'll turn to Graham Stevens, who's our bureau chief for water protection and land reuse. Graham, if you want to offer anything additional on some of those projects.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. As the Commissioner highlighted, this great opportunity to provide these resilience funds is providing the city with an opportunity to study what's happening here, Representative Dillon. Obviously, there's a lot of impervious surface. There's also an issue with this community being burdened with a combined sewer system where, sewage and stormwater is conveyed in the same system. Obviously we also have, significant topography surrounding this area. So I think this study is really going to try to get to, what infrastructure improvements and practices can we implement to reduce that flooding. We all know that the flooding has been far more intense through intense, climate-induced rain events. And this study will, take into consideration current recent, impacts to this community. And that, including, the deployment of green infrastructure, which we can fund, with a partial grant through our Clean Water Fund.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions about that. One is that I attended a number of Zoom meetings convened by the local alders and the leadership of the Board of Aldermen, who have been very, very proactive on this and detail-oriented. And the WPCA, which was very responsive, was under the unfortunate impression that New Haven was not an environmental justice community. That's what they had been informed, they said. And so their original application was limited to one census tract, I believe, and not two. And the second one was actually just as important. Would you know whether or not that mistake about whether or not New Haven should still be considered, it would be considered an EJ community by statute because but the statute isn't self-enforcing, and so unfortunately they got that information. Could you find out and get back to us about whether or not that planning grant, how limited that is? Is it limited to just one census tract? Do you know that?
So I can say that there's a lot of information that's being gathered, regardless of the application of to the census tract. Really, the study is trying to understand in the entire sewer shed of the West River there, where the impacts are coming from. So I wouldn't be concerned about that factor with respect to this planning grant.
Okay. I may have some other questions later, but this is obviously very high interest. The sewers on Upper Whaley Avenue were separated years ago by the DOT in exchange only because the mayor at that time agreed to widen the road, because they don't pay for that unless it's part of the larger project. Before that, they were using rowboats. So, and any details you could get would be helpful. And I know you're reassuring me, but it seems like something always goes wrong. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Would you like me to add in that I believe the application was for the entire watershed, and as I think, and pursuant in part to your pushing on this point, we did successfully ensure that DECD's list of distressed municipality expressly includes those cities like New Haven that are in their 5-year grace period. So if you look at DECD's website, it now makes that clearer. But happy to follow up with you on any further points.
Thank you for intervening there. I didn't see that you were on the call. I appreciate that. And there is a lot of confusion and concern that mistakes will be made. So So I appreciate anything you can do. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you, Rep. Dillon. Yep. Okay. Go ahead. We can move on.
All right. Then that brings us to question 3, which relates to dam safety. And I know we were asked about just a broad range of questions around the status of dams in Connecticut, the type of ownership, and the scope of the dam safety program. So we provided some general points, and I will refer again to Graham Stevens to introduce some of the highlights here, particularly about the dam safety program and how it functions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Again, Graham Stevens, Chief of Water Protection and Land Reuse. So there's been a lot of interest in Connecticut's dam safety program. The state of Connecticut, through DEEP, runs a program that requires owner inspections and repairs of dams as the inspection reports determine upgrades are required. And if you are in one of the 2 highest risk categories, meaning that the dam impounds water and there are structures, homes, or infrastructure downgrade that would be impacted if the dam were to release, then we also require what's called an emergency action plan, which is a communication plan with the town's emergency response folks, so that if there were to be an issue with the dam, the right communications would be able to be made to ensure that people remain safe, whether that be through evacuations or securing infrastructure. Now, I'm happy to say that Connecticut's dams, we have not identified through this process dams that are listed in unsatisfactory condition. We have had dams that have come back through inspections that have been listed in poor condition. And I just want to clarify for everyone that poor really is a category that means that you need a professional engineer to develop and implement the response actions, whether it be, upgrading, the dam components or infrastructure, but we have not identified any that are unsatisfactory. So that's good news. Connecticut does have more dams per river mile than any state based on our industrial legacy and heritage. And we are working with dam owners and encouraging them when they do have repairs to be made, that there are opportunities to assist them if they're interested in removing that dam. Oftentimes folks believe that dams provide for a flood defense. That is not often the case. In fact, it's often not the case that the dams provide any flood protection. And so we are trying to, work with partners, nonprofit partners, and federal funding authorities to bring more money to Connecticut to, remove dams where that's the right decision for the community. And we are also seeking legislation this session to clarify our authorities if an emergency were to arise. For dams that are in, not the best shape or where the owner is not taking the appropriate action to inspect and repair dams, DEEP is also tracking those dams through a weather monitoring system to look for these microbursts of rainfall that could put these dams at potential risk. That is what alerted us to the Fitchville Dam, and we had been monitoring that in Basra. You may have heard back in January, DEEP performed emergency action with a contractor to secure that dam to protect 500 homes downstream in Norwich that were evacuated as a result of that partial breach. I'm happy to take any questions folks might have.
Yeah. Thanks, Graham. Seeing none.
Actually, Senator.
Oh, did I miss you? Yes, Representative DiCaprio. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner and Graham. I just wanted, regarding the Fitchville Dam, it's in the district that I represent. It'd be possible to get a briefing on, the current status of that and, what the plans are going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Representative.
Thank you.
Happy to do so.
Thank you, Graham. I think we're good. I don't see any other hands.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that, we'll move on to our fourth item. This was a question about whether we could reallocate existing radiation staff, presumably to cover some of the new responsibilities DEEP will be taking on as part of the transition to agreement state status, where DEEP would be managing directly the licensing for certain businesses and entities that are have radiation safety requirements for some of the materials that they maintain. And so we provided kind of a detailed response, but certainly we think that there are staffing requirements that are going to be necessary in order to demonstrate to the US NRC that we're sufficiently staffed in order to take on this new responsibility, which we know will provide a lot of benefits to the regulated community. And so I'll turn to Tracy Babbage, and I think Jeff Semanchik is on as well from our Air Bureau to walk through the details of the staffing requirements that are needed.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Again, Tracy Babbage. I'm the chief of the Air Bureau, and I'm joined by Jeff Semanchik, who is the director of radiation. Radiation sits within Air. Again, with this program, we are in the process of taking on the oversight of much of the radioactive materials that's used in medicine industry and academic labs. And just again, on the scope, it's 110 licenses that would be transferred to DEEP and approximately $1.7 million when we complete the process. The question that was asked was about staffing specifically, and I had mentioned that we have already transferred 2 staff within the radiation division, and the question was about the 3 additional positions and whether or not they were needed. And the simple answer to that is yes, they are needed. The 2 staff that we have transferred are in the process of basically setting up the program, working on the regulatory framework associated with it. The 3 positions that we have requested includes a supervisor who will be ultimately responsible for direct oversight of the group, an environmental compliance specialist that would be primarily working on inspections and also assisting with program administration, an environmental analyst that would also be maintaining regulatory requirements and ensuring that the program is correctly synced up with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission requirements and that we stay consistent with those requirements as we need to. And just also, we provided a little bit more background. We did a full analysis to figure out the staffing levels. So looked at data over a 3-year period, analyzed the number of licenses and the activities that would be needed in support of the program, and arrived at the 3 additional staff that have been requested. Happy to take any questions that you might have.
Seeing none, yeah, we might move on.
Great. Tracy, do you just want to, I think you covered 5 and number 5. So we'll just move directly to number 6. We had a question about the 20 by 26 initiative. This is something that DEEP has launched. In fact, we announced it publicly last Friday, an initiative that DEEP is undertaking to continually seek to improve the transparency and the efficiency and the predictability of our permitting and regulatory processes. So, one of the things that I think is relevant to the question that we were asked, which is the question was, we hear that there's not enough staff for the 125 permitting programs we're responsible for. Sometimes permitting staff are the same as enforcement staff, more compliance staff to avoid enforcement. So I think what may be helpful to share is that as part of an earlier version of this effort called 20 by 20, DEEP set a goal to benchmark the expected time it should take for DEEP to complete and reach a decision on each one of the different types of categories of permits that DEEP has responsibility over. And that is over 125 different permitting permits that that DEEP oversees. Some of those are under state law. Some of those programs permits are issued through delegations from the federal government. And different programs have different levels of complexity as well. Different, they involve different degree of environmental impact, and may also have certain required public notice and comment processes, which also is something that influences the timeframes for completion. We divided up all of our different permitting programs, all the 125 plus, and we benchmarked within those considerations. Some that can have an instantaneous answer, others that typically would require 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, so that permit applicants and stakeholders have some predictability about how long a permit might take. We are now, then we put up an online dashboard to track how many applications we're getting for incoming for each of those different permitting categories, and then how well we're doing in meeting those expected timeframes. And so that's become a place where we can review if there are certain types of permits where we're struggling to meet those expected timeframes. There's, we want to apply all the different streamlining and process improvement steps that we can do. Sometimes it may be that we've gotten a significant increase in the number of applications. Sometimes, and this was true in 2022 with the retirement cliff, we had a large number of our veteran employees who departed state service, and we were able to hire some tremendous new staff coming in. But understandably, that impacted some of our timeliness of meeting the timeframes. At the end of the day, having this initiative and this dashboard enables us to better diagnose where there might be certain permitting processes that would benefit from additional staffing. In addition, in order to meet those expected timeframes, and it is accurate that for most of our programs, it's the same staff that are, the same FTE pool is what we're working with to execute both our permitting responsibilities as well as enforcement. So we've also committed in the 20 by 26 initiative to a number of steps to help strengthen the predictability and efficiency of our enforcement work as well, including emphasis on compliance assistance. So anyway, that's just a little intro, but we will, I think we've shared links in our testimony here to a report that summarizes the 20 by 20 initiative and the new goals under 20 by 26. And we also recorded a brief is 20 minutes webinar to just run through what those different goals are. We'd be happy to take any questions or do any follow-up as the committee may have an interest.
Thank you, Commissioner. That was a mouthful. I know there's a lot. I understand, what 125 permitting possibilities that you've got. And so, last Friday we ended up talking about one, which was the Transfer Act, AKA now release-based. And I just want to kind of make sure I'm on the right page here, because it's been a long journey. That we're at the stage where there are draft regulations that have been shared with those affected, the regulated community. And am I understanding correctly, then they are responding to those draft regulations? And is there going to be any other conversation before we get to the public notice posting?
Absolutely. So we're excited to receive the feedback from the members of the legislatively established working group. And I thank you for your, vision and foresight in establishing that working group. And so we're eager to see the feedback that we're going to receive from the working group. And that will inform, we'll be digesting that. We've had a lot of direct discussion with working group members and outreach. All of that will go towards enhancing the draft, the next iteration, the next draft of the regulation, which we would be putting out for public notice and comment. And then finally, after that process is completed, the final version of the regs we anticipate would be submitted to the Legislative Regulations Review Committee.
So we're at the juncture where the conversation between those two entities now has been culminated and you're going to go to public notice, or is there one more exchange between the groups?
Graham, why don't you add some further detail?
Certainly. Again, Graham Stevens, the Chief of Water Protection and Land Reuse. Senator Hartley, it's good to see you.
And our hat is off, by the way, Commissioner, to you and Graham and the team. I mean, they've been tortured along with all of us.
Well, you know, the torturing, if we're going to call it that, has been really valuable for me, because I think, you know, we wouldn't be able to deliver a regulation that's going to work without, you know, as the deputy commissioner said to the Hartford Business Journal, the industry insiders, right? They're the ones, the LEPs, the attorneys that are on boots on the ground, that know, you know, how to deal with these issues and work it around business deals. And, you know, we're really hopeful that in the future, those folks will be able to deliver some great outcomes for Connecticut. But what we see with respect to the working group going forward is this. We're going to continue to meet with the working group monthly, and that occurs until the regulations are adopted. So we are going to be accepting comments up until this Thursday, and then those comments will go into our thinking and help us revise that regulation package, and that regulation package will be shared back with the working group. Then the official public comment period will kick off sometime in late April or May. But we're going to continue to work with the working group, and hopefully any issues that we were not able to fully address, because some of their comments we anticipate will be sizable, we will continue to work with the working group on that so that we can continue to revise and refine that reg before we actually go to the regs review with that proposal. Also, keeping in mind, and the working group has told us this themselves, we need to broaden the conversation and make sure that everyone in Connecticut is on board with this change. So we're doing that as well. I think we've met since the 29th of December, we met with 16 different folks to talk through this, including with the real estate professionals, banking professionals, we went to CEQ, the Council on Environmental Quality, who's represented here today. There's Paul, thanks for inviting us. Every time we meet with someone, we come up with new ideas and approaches that we think are going to improve this reg for the benefit of everyone in Connecticut. So the working group still plays a really vital role for us because they're the ones who have the most detail, but really looking forward to other conversations as well.
Thanks so much, Graham. Thank you. Not just because I know we're up against the clock again too, but I just wanted to, this is top of mind for how many, 3 years? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry.
No, we can move on.
Item 7 was, there was a question about the pilot programs that were initiated in 2023. And we provided further detail here. We provided support to 15 municipalities, or at least through 15 municipal grant contracts to support municipalities implementing food scrap collection and unit-based pricing approaches to reduce the amount of municipal solid waste that municipalities are sending for disposal. And we were very grateful for the funding, and we are putting together a brief overview and webinar to share some of the results that we've received from the implementation of these different pilots, some of which are completed and some of which are still underway. I can move to question number 8. And this was a question, I believe, from Senator Austin, which was about a status update related to wastewater and sewers. Essentially, we released a draft priority list for the Clean Water Fund, and that is we held a hearing and we closed the comment period for comments on the draft priority list at the end of February. We will be getting approval from US EPA, and then the priority list will become, this latest priority list will be have the final list of all the fundable construction projects for FY24 and 25. So we're happy to, if there's any questions on specific projects, I'll note that even projects that are not on the priority list could still be funded because we have a number of different reserves where we just set aside, different buckets of funding that are available, some on a first come, first served basis for things such as planning and design and green infrastructure. Senator, I'd be happy to keep going if there's not a question on that one. We also got a question about the Community Investment Act funds, and I'll turn to Andrew Hoskins to briefly summarize the response on this one. Andrew
Thanks,
Hoskins.
Commissioner. My name is Andrew Hoskins. I'm the Chief of Staff here at DEEP. The question was, how much do we receive each year in CIA funding for the agency? And I presented a table showing the last 3 years, but the average is about $3.7 million of revenue. And you can see that our expenses over the past 3 years have been slightly under that. I'll note that there are 2 staff positions at DEEP that are funded by CIA under a 10% administrative allowance, which is defined by statute. We are seeing a little bit more pressure on that administrative portion specifically, but in terms of open space acquisition and what's needed to sort of drive open space acquisition, this funding is combined with about $10 million per year, at least what's authorized in the biennium for open space acquisitions, and our total grant applications for each of the past 2 years have been kind of significantly below that. So all that to say, at this time, it's not the available funding that's sort of the limiting factor for municipal open space grants. It's actually trying to get eligible applicants. So that's where we've been really dedicating our time as an agency. And lastly, I would just point to SB 11 has a section, which I won't get into all the provisions of it, which sort of looks at how we can promote additional applicants under OSWA and the Urban Green Community Garden programs, for which this funding is used to support. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So SB 11 is the answer to the utilization question.
Yeah, I mean, the provisions in SB 11 will certainly help us reach more audiences. It allows for additional applicants under the Urban Green Community Garden program. It allows for nonprofits to be applicants instead of just municipalities. It expands that program to include EJ communities instead of just targeted investment in distressed communities. So it expands the sort of pool of communities that are eligible to apply. And it allows for some reimbursement of diligence costs for projects in environmental justice communities. So that, that's one of these kind of barriers to entry for this program. Why some either land trusts or municipalities have said that they're unable to apply, is just because it's a really expensive, complicated program to apply for.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is that a department bill?
It's a governor's bill. It's the governor's resilience. So
okay.
I think it's section 27 is the piece that touches OSWA and Urban Green Community Garden.
27, thank you.
Terrific. All right, the next question was a broad one with respect to the status of ARPA dollars that have been allocated to DEEP, and the question specifically was which programs might end with the end of ARPA. So we provided a detailed accounting of all of the different ARPA programs that we have here. There's quite a bit, and so in the interest of time, I don't know, Senator, if there might be specific question or programs that folks would like input on.
Yeah,
happy to speak to them.
this is great because it shows us, you know, where we're gonna be at a cliff and what's being left behind. So perfect. I see no questions, and this is what I needed.
Okay.
Now, what about carry forward? Oh, here you go. Okay.
Yes, we have included carry forward as well in here, and we'd be happy to provide any more detailed status update on any of these projects. But we provided some bullets after the table, speaking to the balances that are unexpended and any status information. So once again, if there's questions on any of these in particular, happy to speak to those. Or
okay, I guess what I'm trying to get my arms around is what will be carried forward in this budget. I see the programs that have been funded, but are you telling me that you're going to be absorbing all of the carried forward dollars in this budget?
Senator, these are Andrew Hoskins, Chief of Staff again. These are sort of programs that were earmarked using, carry forwards previously. I think what's to be carried forward, from the current fiscal year and beyond is a policy question for the budget folks, the governor's team, and the legislature.
Yeah, that's what I just want to know what number we're going to carry forward. That's all. Okay.
We have some information down below about about lapses, which could form that, but how those may be carried forward is not.
No, to be determined, but I'm just looking for that dollar amount. Where's the lapse number?
Harrison, if you scroll down.
Yeah.
Down a little bit more. Actually, I'm sorry, it's in a separate document. Senator, let's let me follow up with the subcommittee separately, and I'll provide a projection of lapsing dollars for this year.
Yeah, that's what I'd like. That would be helpful. Yep. Thank you so much, Andrew. Yep.
My pleasure.
All right. Yeah, number 11. Okay. Yeah, I read it. I got it. Let's just code that NH. That means not happy. Okay. Go ahead. We could go on to 12.
Well, I think, well, I didn't, oh, I'm sorry. You're saying number 11 is the NH. And we do have some promising updates there with respect to the contracts nearly complete. And we, we're enthusiastic about being able to start serving residents in the next, this month, assuming all the signatures come through.
Yeah. So, I mean, is it in the AG's office, Commissioner?
Correct. Yeah, but they just received it last Friday. So, but we'll be happy to continue to provide granular, updates on detailed updates on the progress here.
Okay, thanks. That brings it up a notch on the NH level. Okay. Thank you.
We're aiming for H, so we'll get there.
Yes, right. Thank you. Okay, number 12.
All right, terrific. So number 12, we provided some detailed updates on the $1 million in funding for fish hatcheries. I'll turn to Mason Trumbull to speak to these improvements.
Yeah, hello, Senator Mason Trumbull, Deputy Commissioner Indeed. Senator Austin had asked this question. The legislature had expressed their desire for us to make some improvements to the hatchery system, which we aligned on a list. We've included that list here and categorized it in 3 areas: the projects that have been completed, which includes hiring an additional staff member for the Quinnebog hatchery, buying a couple trucks, replacing some tanks, doing some design work, and a gutter project. We still have a few projects in progress and a couple of projects that we anticipate completing soon. We're trying to make sure some of the projects that we are still working on, we're planning on doing in coordination with some other projects that'll be happening later this year. So we're trying to make sure we're not delaying those on purpose. We're just trying to make sure we fit them in with other ongoing projects at the hatchery.
I'm going to be there short. Okay. Thank you for that. And I'm looking to see if there might be hands raised, folks, but I don't see any. Seeing none, Commissioner, any farewell comments, Madam?
We are so grateful for the time, and we'll follow up on some of the additional questions, briefings on dams, et cetera, dam safety and so on. But we appreciate the time.
Yeah, no, and thank you for the very detailed response. It's greatly appreciated. And I don't see any other hands. Thank you to Commissioner Dykes and team, and to my colleagues. If there are no other questions, Madam Administrator, I think we are done. Is that right?
We are all set, Madam Chair. Thank you so much to the DEEP team.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Apologies.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye everyone. Take care.
Good night, everyone.